Testing? Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Po Hannah Lee, and I'm from Temasek Polytechnic. I'm a third-year student here. I'm under Team Beluga, which consists of 3 members. Unfortunately, 2 of my members are not here today. For Team Beluga, we went through a space challenge under humanitarian aid and disaster relief. So our topic that we concentrated on was actually communications. So how can we help to prevent disaster or reduce disasters through communication? So introducing our prototype project that we presented, the SOS Phone. Before we begin, we will start off with a video, and then I'll follow on with the presentation.
On the evening of 22 December 2018, a tsunami struck Western Java and southern Sumatra Islands. It was caused by undersea landslide, which followed on with an eruption from Anak Krakatoa volcano. World Vision, a humanitarian aid organization, was assisting families and children in some of the more badly affected areas. However, even after all the help the people affected in the area has received, more than 400 people were reported dead on 26 December 2018. These natural disasters have affected many people's lives, and many will need help in years in rebuilding their homes and communities. That is why we came up with a product that acts as a means of communication for both victims and help services, which will help reduce the number of casualties in this situation. Introducing the SOS Phone, a product that is effective, affordable, and convenient. How does the SOS Phone work? When a disaster strikes, for example, an earthquake, and there is a victim trapped under a collapsed area, a nearby unharmed victim is able to help the victim under the collapsed building by finding a nearby emergency post, or if not, an airdrop for the SOS Phone. Upon opening the box, inside comes the SOS Phone, a battery, an instruction manual on how to use the phone, all inside a waterproof bag. Insert the battery and press the on button to start using the SOS Phone. This is to call for help, as well as send out a distress signal to the rescue team. The SOS Phone is a product that is scarlet red and looks like a cordless home phone. It is multifunctional, which includes a one-press SOS button, flashlight, distress siren, audible feedback, geolocation capability, and is able to preset text or voice record. It is able to make use of satellite and mobile technology, aid rescue efforts during disasters, and is effective in communication. The SOS Phone is also designed to be as user-friendly as possible, allowing users of all ages to use it efficiently. As shown here, the SOS Phone is manufactured by using a 3D printing method and designed with 12 glow-in-the-dark keypads. When pressed, there will be an audible feedback to the user indicating the number that was pressed.
1 4 0.
When pressing the center red SOS button with one press, it will call the local disaster response organization without a SIM card. By holding it for 3 seconds, it will activate the phone's geolocation and communicate with any satellite in range.
SOS Phone is turning on. The SOS Phone is turning off.
SOS Phone is compatible for both website and smartphone application for monitoring purposes. Blue indicates the SOS Phone is not activated at its designated area. Green indicates the SOS Phone activated but the signal is not triggered. Red indicates the SOS Phone activated and the signal is triggered. So how does the website and smartphone apps get its live broadcasting location of our SOS Phone? The solution is the Airbus Zephyr. The Airbus Zephyr is able to communicate using L-band frequencies of 1000 MHz to 2000 MHz and is able to communicate with most of the satellites, which includes the Airbus Zephyr. In addition, in order to communicate with the Iridium satellites, the phone sends signals in the L-band frequency. The location of the phone can then be calculated by whichever satellites receive the signal and the Doppler shift of the received signal. In conclusion, the SOS phone is effective, efficient, and convenient to use. It is also lightweight, cheap, and easy to produce. Hence, we present to you the SOS phone, tomorrow's disaster management made available today.
Okay, so following on with the presentation. So what does our SOS phone do? So it uses satellite and mobile technology. It aids rescues efforts during disaster and is effective in communication. It also connects to our website as shown in the video through mobile application or actually through our website. So this is our phone product design that we tried to invent. It's actually very similar to a product that was already invented, which is called the Spare One, which is a company actually created in, I think, New Zealand, if I'm not wrong. So we actually just modified it a bit and changed it so that it's not really bulky and it's very lightweight so that it's easy for both rescuers and as well as victims to use. So product functions that we have is that the phone can call emergency services. It has an LED torchlight so that it can signal to the victims can signal to the rescuers indicating where they are in case they can't talk during a disaster. They have a panic siren to gather the attention of rescuers, as well as they have preset text and pre-record voices to send out those pre-texts so that rescuers know what kind of condition they're in, whether they're in a collapsed building or whether they are in nearby, whether the area nearby is flooded, that kind of situation. It also has a long battery life, which if you don't use the phone that often, it can actually last for 24 hours. And as well as it has a location and alert service. It has a dual SIM card usage. So if you want to use your own personal SIM card, you can actually take it out and put in your own SIM card to actually call your own family members for help. It also supports nano SIM and micro SIM. It operates through a server and it has a resistant design. So specifications for the phone is it communicates well through using geolocation through L-band frequency of 1000 MHz to 2000 MHz, which is actually like roughly the same communication as the Airbus Zephyr, which is actually a high altitude pseudo satellite. So through that, the satellite is something like a solar-powered drone satellite, which will hover around the area to find and capture signals so that they know what kind of area they're in or whether the signal is being sent at a particular location that we have to look at. It also has a GSM of 900 Hz to 1800 Hz for just normal call services. So this is roughly what our website will kind of look like. There's still some modification that needs to be done. There is a legend at the bottom right-hand corner that indicates at which location and how the phone is actually being activated or not. So if blue indicates that the SOS phone is not activated, but it's at this particular location at this AED post that we've placed, and if there is a green marker, that means that it is on, but the signal is not yet sent, so that means there's no immediate rescue. Red means that someone's sending out a signal and it needs attention and needs help. So how are we going to apply our SOS phone to disaster situations? Is that it's catered for both victims and rescuers. So victims can get it through AED posts, and rescuers have it on hand with them, so that in case, for example, the broadcasting station is down because of disaster, this phone actually still can be used through, not through the GSM, but it actually can locate, it can actually send out a signal to the satellite, which is the Airbus Zephyr, so that it can receive the alert and then send its alert signals to the military base so that it can gather and know where is the location of our phone. It also can be airdrop if it's not AED pose. So applying it to disaster situation is that we can analyze this data through our website as well, and we also place it in, we decided to place it in more concentrated areas or places where it's more disaster prone, so that it's able to reduce the number of casualties, or it reduces the number of time spent for us to actually go there and rescue the victims, as well as it's used for preventive measures. So why did we create the SOS phone? So using your own smartphone is actually battery life consuming, and as well as sometimes during a disaster, maybe your smartphone is damaged, or like maybe the network is down. So this phone is both able to send out signals through the Airbus Zephyr, as well as I said, if you don't use your GSM, your GPS, your location, it can last up to actually 24 to 42 hours, so like 1 to 2 days. And it's also design durability, so we use 3D printing methods, but we're still working on that to make it even more durable as well. So the advantages and benefits is long-lasting battery. It uses satellite communication. It has emergency mass communication. It's easy to fabricate through 3D printing, and it's user-friendly. So one thing about user-friendly is that we are using Braille and as well as like glow-in-the-dark keypad, so that if the person is, for example, trapped in a dark room, you still be able to see the numbers, as well as you also have audio signal. So if you were to press a number, there will be the numbers out loud on audio. And therefore, I present to you the SOS phone, tomorrow's disaster management made available today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Does anyone have questions? We might have time for just one. Okay.
So did I understand you right that there is, for people that are blind or can't hear, that there is something on the phone so that they know what buttons to press or what they pressed?
Yes. The phone keypads, they actually have a braille, so those are for the people who are blind, so that they can feel what kind of numbers that they are supposed to press if they want to call for help. They also have an audio feedback, so that just in case they want to know whether it's turned on, they can just press the button and the audio feedback will receive, and then it will send out an audio and saying that, oh, the SOS phone is on. Oh, you press number 1. Oh, you press number 2. So they know that maybe even in dark or whether they can't see, they're still able to communicate and send out the signal if they need help. Yes.
You say there's the audio feedback, but there's so many different languages. How do you know which languages do you want to use?
Basically, this phone is still a prototype. So we're still working. We're just giving this as an example, as this is for people who can speak English. But if you want to implement this SOS phone to other countries, you can actually change the audio into their language instead. So yeah. Is there any more questions?
Disasters don't choose places to happen. It can happen to foreign people at foreign places.
That's true, but for our SOS phone, it can only be implemented if the government actually allows us to do so, because as well as like call services, we also need to know whether, for example, Singapore, we have a +65 number, right? So if we want to implement to other countries, we also have to know whether they will allow us to use their SIM card, or whether we are able to actually put it at the location that they want to, or if there's if the military wants to use it as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hannah.
Okay, just start off, I'll give some background on myself. So I'm Ming Jie. I'm a student in Singapore. So this project was actually done during our national service. So like we were serving NS, we were spending full time in the army, so this project was basically done over a lot of weekends and sleepless nights. So if you're interested, tomorrow there is a rubber rocket workshop and competition with very attractive prizes if you want to come down tomorrow afternoon and evening. Okay, so back to this. So the background for this competition was to develop a satellite system, satellite constellation for human assistance and disaster relief. So basically, in essence, get more photos faster, better of disaster areas to better guide disaster relief efforts. So I'll just let the video explain it.
SES Neo stands for Satellite Constellation System for Near Equatorial Earth Observation. So natural disasters have often been the result of natural processes of Earth. If we look at this figure, from 1950s to the 1970s, natural disaster occurrences have remained relatively constant. But from the 1970s onwards, natural disaster occurrences have exponentially increased in frequency and intensity, likely due to increased global warming and climate change. And if we look at a more specific table, we can see that floods and storms occur most frequently, while earthquakes and droughts are actually the most deadly based on the average number of deaths per occurrence. And so we plotted two maps with each red dot indicating an instance of each natural disasters based on historical data collected. And from this data, we can identify South America, South Asia, East Asia, and Southeast Asia as the regions within a plus minus 24 degree latitude difference from the equator, where floods and earthquakes are most concentrated. And these disasters often result in human fatalities and also serious economic damage. Floods and earthquakes alone accumulated a total of $1.6 billion in economic damage in the past 60 years. This poses a great concern as a large majority of the world's underprivileged population live in the above-mentioned countries close to the equator. And these underprivileged countries are also least likely to be able to afford technology that can predict and actively manage climate disasters. And these crucial monitoring systems often include disaster warning systems such as tsunami sirens, tidal and fissure monitoring systems.
EO's satellite solutions available to underdeveloped and poorer nations will reduce the cost of EO satellites by addressing its two problems: the cost of development and launch, and the cost of maintaining the satellite system. Our solution is based on two simple principles: reduce and reuse. Firstly, we lower the cost of development by reducing the complexity of the satellite design. We modularize the function of each CubeSat in our constellation, and we standardize the common hardware used for the CubeSat to achieve its basic functions. Secondly, we minimize the cost of launch and maintenance. SES Neo is designed to give itself the option between piggyback rides and the use of its own small, cheap rockets. All aspects of our design, orbit, and launch plan are centered around these two principles. SES Neo is designed with a distributed satellite architecture. The constellation consists of 3 groups of 10 satellites each. Each group has 2 satellites dedicated to downlink. The other 8 satellites have Earth observation payloads. These 8 satellites will observe the Earth and relay the data to 2 dedicated downlink satellites, one on X-band and the other on VHF. The X-band downlink satellite will relay this information to dedicated ground control stations and also act as a relay for uplink commands to the Earth observation satellites, so that they know where to observe and what to observe. We have also added a VHF downlink satellite in order to give disaster relief teams quick access to our information in order for them to organize rescue efforts. The advantages of SES Neo over conventional EO satellites are summarized in this photo. Not only is it much smaller, it is much lighter, it costs less to launch, costs less to maintain, and unlike the conventional EO satellites that are rigid and customized and expensive, ours is cheap, modularized, flexible, customizable, and commercial off the shelf.
So now I'll be talking about the orbital parameters of SES Neo. The main challenge it faces is that we need to address disasters in the equatorial region. And disaster management is especially time sensitive, as relief teams need accurate and reliable data quickly to help them locate potential survivors. We can start by looking at existing satellite systems in orbit around our Earth. So for example, the ISS orbits about 400 km, the planet constellation orbits about 475 km in a sun-synchronous orbit, and there are even higher orbits. GPS orbits about 20,000 km, and GOES, our meteorological satellite, orbits about 37,000 km in the geosynchronous orbit. However, what we've noticed is that
Earth observation satellites tend to orbit in low Earth orbit. This allows them to be closer to Earth and give them a higher spatial resolution for their Earth observation sensors. Thus, we decided that SES Neo will be in a low Earth orbit. However, we wanted to determine the optimal orbit for our constellation too. Thus, we used AGI's SDK to help us calculate which orbital parameters would give us the ideal coverage time. We ran the simulations and the data show us that the ideal orbit for us was altitude of about 500 km with an inclination of 20 degrees. This gives us an average revisit time to each target for about 6.6 hours. For our launch plan, we would use a small rocket, so we are able to fit all our satellites in each swarm into a single rocket, allowing us to choose our ideal orbit. This can be achieved through the advent of smaller rockets in industry, such as JAXA's SS5205, which is able to carry about 100 kg into a low Earth orbit.
You are looking at the SES Neo CubeSat bus. Each satellite contains deployable solar panels, 2 deployable S-band patch antennas on the side, and an Earth-facing EO payload. The solar panels are deployed by fanning out the arrays. This obtuse angle makes use of aerodynamic torque as well as gravity gradient to stabilize the CubeSat as it orbits. This cost passive attitude control saves a significant amount of energy which our attitude determination system can use to make final adjustments with magnetorquers and reaction wheels for specific mission requirements. This is the internal layout of each CubeSat. It is standardized across all CubeSats in the constellation. Each satellite has 2 use of space for the variable EO payload. We also make use of a mostly passive thermal control system using bimetallic springs to passively vent heat out, coatings to reflect away the heat, as well as paraffin as a thermal capacitor to stabilize the temperature. Only some components need active thermal control. We also use mesh networking between the CubeSats so that data can be centralized in 1 or 2 of the CubeSats, which can then downlink it to Earth in a more efficient manner. We also use radiation tolerant and resistant chips instead of radiation hardened chips, which have a lower cost, yet the reliability is still sufficient. We also use secure protocols that make sure that our CubeSats cannot be taken control of by anyone other than us. We also redesigned the internal bus that allows the modules to communicate more robustly and more effectively in the harsh radiation-filled environment of space.
Moving on, I will describe each module present in the CubeSat. Our aim is to assist in disaster relief effort. Therefore, data easily interpreted by humans are very useful. We will be using state-of-the-art CMOS sensors to capture visual images. The images produced can differentiate what are the objects and materials on the ground. For example, when a certain area is covered by a lot more water after a disaster, we can hypothesize that a flood has occurred. However, to gather data on the ground height, we will also need a synthetic aperture radar, a rated SAR. Unfortunately, it consumes a lot of power, which means that it can only operate for a limited amount of time. Our SAR satellite can take measurements multiple times when an area is in range. Combining the data can be equivalent to a larger antenna, thereby increasing resolution and quality of the signal. It can also use to predict volcano eruptions, earthquakes, using ground height shifts because of stresses in the rock underneath. It can also use height changes in collapsed buildings to direct disaster relief efforts. For conditions above the ground, we can use GNSS reflectometry. It's done using 2 different polarized antennas on the top and the bottom of the satellite. Reflectometry compares the signal directly reaching the satellite and another bouncing off the Earth. These signals can be compared with their time of arrival, signal strength and signal quality to gain useful information about the ground and atmosphere conditions. All the data from the previously mentioned modules will be downlinked to the Earth for further processing and dissemination. X-band and VHF will be used. X-band is the main mode that will downlink the bulk of data. Additionally, we decided to include a VHF band downlink because we think ground relief teams on disaster sites will benefit greatly from up-to-date satellite data. We chose a deployable antenna to be fitted on board our CubeSat. One will be fitted by X-band while the other will be adjusted for VHF. For maintaining the precise altitude required for downlink, we will be using a star tracker. This illustration shows a single downlink satellite that will collate data other CubeSats in close proximity and downlink it. This will be very similar for uplink also.
SES Neo will provide visual, SAR and GNSS reflectometry data for all phases of disaster management. So for disaster prediction and monitoring, we have change detection using visual and SAR imagery. We have spectroscopy, we have SAR altimetry, and we also have interferometric SAR. And these allow us to predict volcano eruptions, wildfires, droughts and also floods. And change detection also allows us to detect forestry changes over time. And for disaster search and rescue, we are able to also perform visual change detection to determine
which buildings are damaged and also which areas are flooded. And for last but not least, disaster recovery, we are able to perform actuarial analysis and also damage assessment. All of this data will be served on a platform that incorporates machine learning that constantly tags objects such as ships, buildings, and estimates the severity of the damage. So in conclusion, SES Neo is an affordable, cost-effective, and easily maintainable constellation of CubeSats, highly capable in assisting governments, non-governmental organizations, and disaster relief teams in all four prongs of disaster management in the tropical region. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that was the explanation for the whole project. I think it's better if everyone just asks me questions about what they have about satellites or about space. Like, I guess I've gained some knowledge and experience through this project, and I'm happy to share with you guys.
So do I understand this right? So you shoot up like small satellites up there, like you said, a swarm. How big is a swarm?
Okay, so for one satellite, you can think of it as probably like this and this high. So this is one satellite. So for each swarm, we're envisioning 10 of these. So 10 of these will be equivalent to what people in the industry will call a small satellite. So 10 of these to them is one small satellite. So to launch up this amount of stuff, which is about 100 kg, it could cost, if you're going for a larger rocket, you're piggybacking on someone else's launch, it could cost about $200,000 versus buying your own rocket, which can cost upwards of $100 million. So that's the rough size that we're talking about for one swarm.
So, and then they fly around in some orbit, and then they try to detect catastrophes, or that's because I didn't really, it was really hard to hear because it's very loud, too loud to understand everything. So that's what I got. Is this what it does?
So basically what it does is once you launch these 10 satellites, so they separate out and then they fly in formation to maintain a rough distance from each other. And then for each of those satellites, they have different payloads. Like some has a camera, some has an infrared camera, some has radio antennas. So they all work together as if they are one big satellite. So instead of launching one, maybe 300-400 kilo satellite up, you're launching 10 of these 10 kilo smaller satellites up to do the same job.
Okay.
Then what's the difference between this and what weather stations in all over the world are doing?
So if you're talking about weather stations, you're probably talking about those weather satellites, right? So weather satellites, like I mentioned, they are based 37,000 kilometers away from the Earth. So the resolution you get from weather satellites may be from a 10 km to 10 km, that's your 1 pixel density. But if you're 500 km from the Earth, you can get much higher resolution of up to 2 to 3 meters. So that means it's more useful for disaster management in the sense that you can detect houses, you can detect cars, you can detect like traces of where people have been or people might be trapped under. If you use just a weather satellite, you're just going to get one big pixel as 10 km by 10 km. That encompasses the whole damage area already. So that has a different use case.
Would you say that your background in astronomy or astronomy.sg helped you with this project?
So my background in astronomy.sg really has very little to do with this engineering side of the competition, because what we do is actually astronomy outreach to give students opportunities to share their passion with the public. So in a way, I guess it has helped me because I know how tough projects can be, but everything that we've put into this project was learned in the span of maybe 3 to 4 months.
Hello everyone, I'm Surya. I'm just going to give a short presentation. If you're wondering why there's hardly any hair on my head, I'm currently serving in the Singapore Armed Forces. So they pretty much took all my hair 2 weeks ago. So yeah, so I'm just going to give a quick introduction into the theme of the competition that we did during our time. So during the Singapore Space Challenge 2018, the theme of the competition was to develop a kind of a concept or a solution to link up multiple cube satellites. Cube satellites are basically these satellites which are like 10 by 10 by 10 cm, so they are considered nano satellites for their class, and we have to link them up while they are in orbit. Why? I mean, the purpose of linking up satellites while they're in space has many potential applications, such as you can link them up to form larger structures through a successive period of testing and operation of a particular mission, or you can link them up to form, or you can form larger interplanetary spacecraft and all that. So there are multiple various applications for linking up satellites from space. But the competition did not focus on the application part of linked up CubeSats, but rather how are we going to link up these satellites together. So if just to give you a perspective of what this mission actually entails. If you think about linking up two objects while here on Earth, you're talking about two objects which relative velocities each other is like maybe about 1 or 2. It's like me shaking hands with you. That's actually quite easy. But if you're talking about joining two objects while they're in space, we need to keep in mind that each of these objects are traveling at a speed of maybe 6 to 7 kilometers per second at completely different positions while in space. So if you're talking about space, it's like hundreds of times bigger than the ocean itself, and they're in different positions. So we actually had to develop a solution to find a way to somehow bring these two objects traveling at extreme velocities together and link them up in one without destroying each other. So that was the mission concept that was provided to us. And of course, we basically were brainstorming through. So I was a team leader of that team, so I was trying to direct the discussions to go in a way that we didn't want to come up with a solution that almost all other teams would come up with, and that is like, okay, if we're going to talk about two cube satellites meeting together while they're in space itself, you put all the necessary hardware and engines in the satellite itself, and somehow program those two satellites to find each other in space. We wanted to completely avoid that, because for me, I wanted to approach this not just from a scientific point of view, but also from an entrepreneurial point of view. Where if customers come up to me and tell me that they want two CubeSats to be linked up in space, I don't think they're going to be very happy if I tell them that I'm going to literally add in like up to 7 to 8 subsystems, which are actually going to be much larger than the satellites itself. And those subsystems are necessary for the linking up of these cube satellites while they are in orbit. So what the solution that we came up with was we leave these CubeSats alone. We don't even touch them. Why not we come up with a transportation system instead? So to give you a better analogy, if person A is at, example, at this point of the town, person B is another point of another position within the same town. One way is that person A can walk up to the person in person B, and he can walk and he can find that person. He can use all his bodily energy to meet that person and link up with that particular person, which obviously wouldn't be very efficient. I mean, who here is willing to walk 10 to 15 kilometers to meet their friend? I mean, I wouldn't. Yeah. So and that is basically the same concept here at CubeSats. If you're going to get two cube satellites in space to meet together on its own, it's going to take a lot of fuel demand. You're going to burn a lot of fuel. You're going to be using a lot of energy just to locate, navigate, and link up with the CubeSat. So what we did was we developed a transportation system. So instead, this person A can board a bus, and the bus will transport him to person B. So we applied that same concept while and applying this to in space itself. So we created a transportation system for a CubeSat. So this transportation system would pick up, say, the first CubeSat, and it would fire its engines, and it would move to a second position in the orbit to meet up with the second CubeSat, and then link those CubeSats together and form a combined new spacecraft as per required in the mission. So I'm just going to show a video just to illustrate how this concept would actually play out. I think this would be more clearer in how this mission will take place. Let me play the video. can you from the beginning? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sure. So this is the launch phase of the mission. So this launch vehicle, the rocket, is carrying the first CubeSat. So once the vehicle reaches the orbit, it will go to its final orbital position. So this is the animation that my team came up with. Yeah, so that is like the first CubeSat that's already being deployed. So now the transportation system will now link up with the CubeSat, join together with it, deploy its solar panels, and activate its ion thrusters for to go to the next position in orbit to link. So what you can see here, this is called the spiraling trajectory. So our transportation system actually makes use of a low impulse ion thruster. So it fires at a very slow speed and raises its orbit very slowly over a period of few days to get to a higher orbital position where the second CubeSat is located. So once this transporter reaches the final position of the CubeSat, it will initiate this mission execution phase called the phase burn. So it will activate its second set of engines that we have designed into this transporter. So it will fire its engines to initiate an impulse burn that will allow it to catch the second satellite through a series of phased orbits. It's a bit complicated. Basically, it's just making use of its mini rocket engines to burn at a very specific thrust and time to catch a second satellite. So that's how the concept basically works. I'll skip forward a bit just to show you the point where it catches. So if you can look at here, this is the first satellite, this is the second satellite. So this process actually takes place over a matter of maybe a few days. That depends on the fuel budget that we have. So for our mission, what we did was we wanted to keep the fuel burn for this particular phase of the mission as low as possible. So that means that it initiates a phase orbit burn of just where the apogee of the orbit is just slightly lower than the apogee of the main orbit. So in that case, the burn itself will take a minimal amount of fuel, but the mission itself will be slightly longer in order to catch the second satellite. So let me skip forward to the part where it catches the satellite. Yeah. So as you can see over here, both the transporter spacecraft and the target CubeSat has already rendezvous met at this particular point of the holding parking orbit. So this is the part where the transporter will link up with the second CubeSat. So it will initiate the docking pods, and it will deploy the docked CubeSats away into its orbit, into its final mission. So this can actually take place over multiple mission modes. And if anyone's asking, what about maintenance and all that? So we actually came up. It's not shown in this video, but we actually came up with a method to be able to refuel this particular transportation, this transport system, maybe over a matter of 5 years and 6 years through multiple missions. So this particular transporter can actually remain in space for like at least 8 years and conduct multiple docking missions while being refueled at the same time through multiple refueling missions launched from the ground. Yeah, so that's like a brief explanation of what we came up with during the competition itself. So that's like the overall summary. If you all have any questions about what we did, you all can feel free to ask me about. Yeah.
I'm curious to ask, when you're talking about refueling, what kind of fuel are you putting on board? Okay. It's for the propulsion payload, is it?
Okay, I mean, this is just the mission concept and stuff. But I mean, please forgive me if it doesn't make sense to you.
No, it does.
Okay, so for us, for this particular transportation, we call it a transporter. We really couldn't come up with a creative name for it, so it's just called transporter. It utilizes two propulsion systems to meet the mission needs. So one is the spiraling trajectory, which would make use of an ion thruster. So in this case, it uses a Xe xenon gas. Xenon gas in liquid form. So it just gets ionized it will get ionized using an acceleration grid, and it will use that to produce a low impulse thrust to slowly raise the trajectory. So you have one tank for liquid xenon. We use liquid xenon because it has a higher density, so we can store more for a longer mission phase. We did our calculations of the specific impulse of the engine and all that. So and how much of the final mass of the spacecraft, and we kind of had to balance everything. It's like a balancing act of coming up with the design. And also we also made use of a monopropellant hydrazine. And we used monopropellant because we kept in mind that we wanted this spacecraft to remain in orbit for like 8 years. If you used not a monopropellant, bipropellant, yeah. A monopropellant would make use of a catalyst, and the catalyst might degrade after maybe 1 or 3 years, and we wanted to avoid that. So we went for the bipropellant hydrogen option instead. So we used, so in this case, all the fuels can be refueled. So the refueling would be like, okay, you execute 3 missions. So it takes a bit of mission planning. So if we assume a fully filled transporter in the beginning of the mission, so it raises its orbit, catches the first CubeSat, catches the second CubeSat, and the third CubeSat will be attached with a refueling port. And once it links up with the third CubeSat, it will first attach a refueling port, and it will refuel its fuel tanks first, link up with the CubeSat, and then so by the time it reaches its third and then it meets a refueling port, it'll be fully filled or whatever, ready for next mission. So once it's ready for next mission, then it will link up with, say, the next 3 CubeSats, and the third CubeSat will have another refueling port. So it requires a bit of a mission planning on where exactly to attach the refueling port to which CubeSat of the satellite. So that's how so in this case, the refueling would be xenon gas, xenon, and the bipropellants for the hydrazine, and also the coal gas for the nitrogen attitude control system, attitude control thrusters installed on this spacecraft. So it sounds a bit crazy. It has not been implemented in real life yet. I mean, that's the whole point of the competition. But we realize it is theoretically possible. Very difficult to execute, but it's possible in theory. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment that it's not impossible. It's really a very interesting analysis that you have performed. I think the whole idea behind this is we are looking at solutions, or rather new mission maneuvers. So things like this, it's not impossible. It's all about, the devil's in the details. It's all in execution, and I think we'll be happy to have a discussion later on.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, we have been quite curious about this, so I think we can have a conversation later. Yeah.
Because you say you want to link up different satellites, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
But if different companies launch their satellites differently, why would they want to link their satellites together?
Yeah, that goes in the application part. If there is actually a market, I mean, when SSTA came up with the mission requirement, I mean, they realized that the linking up of CubeSats is a potential future a mission field, because as you can look at the size of satellites are getting smaller, and people are launching more and more smaller satellites into space, and the physical link up of satellites while they're in orbit is definitely one particular field of area that people might be interested in. So for companies, they can have different reasons why they want to link up. I can give you one particular example. I mean, which we thought of is example. If I am designing a very complicated spacecraft with a lot of innovative technologies that has not been tested before. Say I'm building either an interplanetary craft, and so I can either choose to put all the systems together on the ground itself, and then launch them into orbit. But then the risk with doing that is that because it contains so many new technologies inside, if one of these systems fail while on orbit, the whole spacecraft is redundant. So if what this Linkup option offers is that I can develop subsystem by subsystem, launch them into orbit, test them, and once I confirm that they are operating, I can launch the next subsystem, link up, test them, link up with the working subsystem. So this ensures that it's like a successive dynamic building of spacecraft, and it is a completely revolutionary idea of how spacecraft can be developed. So our current way of developing spacecraft, you test all systems on the ground, you link them up together, send them out to space. What this will allow is that you build them while they're in space itself, test the systems on the ground, send them up, and if one of the subsystems fail, that's all right, you throw it away. You still have your other system that is still operating while they are in the air. So it's definitely, it offers a revolutionary new way of constructing our space systems in the future. It doesn't just have to be CubeSat. It can even be larger systems larger spacecraft. Yeah. So that is one way where we can, one potential application for linking up satellites while they're in space. Yes.
Okay, we have one last question possibly from the lady in front.
So, okay, the transport system is if it allows different cube satellites to dock in there. So since lots of cube satellites are being launched, and there's great possibility of having dysfunctional in the space. So can you just transport the dysfunctional ones as well and bring them into a lower orbit for disintegration? So it clears up the space as well?
Oh, are you talking about clearing up the?
Yes.
Yes. This system actually definitely has applications in space debris clearance. I mean, the whole. I mean, if you look at the concept itself, this is like the ability to use a transportation system to link up with another object in space. That particular mastering of the system would open up possibilities to various things, and one of the things, like you mentioned, deorbiting of space debris. And it just so happens that this year, the theme of the SSA competition is deorbiting. Clearing of space debris. And I'm not going to go into so much detail, but I'm taking part in this year's competition, and we definitely do intend to make use of whatever that we have experienced in the past and fully utilize anything to come up with a solution to actually deorbit space debris. But yes, what you said is right. This does have potential applications for to link up with objects and then and clear the space of the debris by deorbiting the satellite itself. Yes, the debris that we're talking about.
Yeah, thanks for joining us in this afternoon session. We wanted to put this panel together because we wanted to bring together the voices of our future, who will actually be the ones to also continue to drive the course of space programs in Singapore. And if my math is kind of still okay, I think their combined age is just only a little bit over a century years old. So this is how young this, students, well, not even students, these young people, young Singaporeans here. And Surya even had to book out from camp. Therefore, he's a very nice new look, and to join us here today. In the interest of time, because we are running a bit late, because I talk like rocket speed, right? So I will go through all the panelists and save them the trouble of talking about themselves. Priya, she works in Entrepreneurs Hub, one of these new space startups. So we're very proud of her. She was a participant in one of SSTA's program, the Space Challenge, in 2012. So you can see she's really, starting her interest in space at a very young age. She loves technology, entrepreneurship, data analytics, and she's currently the CEO and co-founder of Explore Maps, very young CEO here. Ming Jie, gentleman on the far right, took part in our competition early this year, won $10,000. Oh, yes. And yes, very passionate aerospace engineer, all-round techie, and interested in emerging technologies to leverage on digital trends and disrupting industries. He's the president of astronomy.sg, as you would have heard earlier. Kim Hyun-ji, So I met her at a bar, and I found out that she has also started her own company with some of the ex-participants. Very passionate, very self-starting, and also, interested to pursue an interest in space tech. Surya, you've heard him earlier. They run the space startup together with Hyunji called Velocity Space to develop reusable orbital vehicles for the very small satellites. And Hannah, participant of the HADR competition, she's enthusiastic, she's very creative, studying aerospace engineering at Temasek Polytechnic. So this is the very distinguished panelists we have here today. Now, I want to talk to you guys. You were definitely not around when moon landing happened. Any one of you has something to say about how it felt growing up and, oh yeah, we put a man on the moon. What was it, a song to you? What was it? How did you feel about it? You don't all have to answer. It's not a classroom. Just anyone who has an interesting perspective.
Yeah, you're right. So this happened like really long ago, and probably none of us was born then, or was just getting born. I don't know. So the first time I knew about this was actually in an encyclopedia, that we put someone on the moon. And I asked my mom, what is this? And she was like, that's an astronaut. And that's where everything started, yeah, for me. So, yeah, anybody else?
Yeah, well, growing up, I grew up in an Indian family. So my grandma would constantly tell me about all kinds of like folk tales about like all this like fairy creatures on the moon and all that. So I think when it came to a time where I actually started getting interest in space and learning that that the Americans developed the Apollo program to put men on the moon, it actually felt quite liberating. Like we could finally step above all the myths of the past 3,000 years, and we have finally stepped foot into on an heavenly body that once men thought impossible. It's like some mythical world out there. So that really sparked my interest in science. It's like it is supernatural reality that we actually managed, like from being a caveman that we once were, and then we compiled together what we had, and we completely traveled to another world. Using our technology. So it felt liberating as a human being, as a species, for me to actually learn that we could do that. So yeah, it was the start of my journey into the space industry and my interest.
So actually, it's coincidentally my birthday falls on the Apollo landing itself. So
Happy
actually,
birthday!
Thank you. So actually, I found out that the moon landing, I think it was on my 10th anniversary or 9th anniversary. So there was a news article saying, "Oh, this is anniversary of Apollo landing." I was like, "Oh, great," But I was wondering then, when can we go to space travels? Is it gonna be 10 years, 20 years soon? So I asked my parents, like, can we one day, can we go to the moons? I mean, it was happening 30 years ago. They landed. Why can't we go? Why are they not going back? So actually, I asked my parents, and then parents told me, why don't you work on why don't you be an engineer? Work on the area where you can contribute. So I think it was really, for me, that moment I realized, I actually, I want to contribute. In what ways, in engineering or scientists. So I'm really hoping that we can contribute in one way, others, so where we can space travels. It won't be just. Right now we have like two people on the moon, but soon it will be 20 people going to moons. So I think that sort of inspired me, motivated me.
I think someone who is inspired and actually took action about it, and working towards the dream of making moon mission a possibility for Singaporeans. Now, Ming-Jie, what got you interested in space tech? How did you get started? Did people call you crazy?
No, probably not. I don't recall that. So I guess I started more of an aviation enthusiast, like with planes going down to Changi Airport at odd hours of the day to catch special planes with different liveries. Then it sort of escalated literally into space tech when I started reading about, what the advancements in space, and started reading about all these factual, like all these cool facts, like people landing on the moon, like, oh my God, how do you do something so unimaginably difficult at the time? I mean, I can't think of how they're going to do it without computers. Like, I just use my iPhone for everything now. I don't know how they did it back then.
Interestingly, in a discussion we had a few weeks back at the US Embassy, because of the Moon mission and the Apollo mission, it created the integrated circuit design, how you can compress a lot of processing capabilities into a very small unit that led to the discovery of the founding and the basis of what we know as computers and eventually handphones today. So this is a very critical spin-off from some of these space missions. Now, Hyunji, can I ask you, when you took part in some of these space challenges in Singapore, were there challenges that you faced, resistance, or you had very supportive folks around you?
I think definitely for parents, they were very definitely supportive. They were optimistic. You guys can do it. Try hard. But I think maybe from peers, they weren't so they were more of pessimistic. Like the questions: Are you sure? You guys will be competing. Students from high schools, local universities. You sure you can cope with it? But I still remember the very first meeting of our official meeting. Surya, he told me that we are aiming for grand prize only. We are not looking for experience. I mean, yes, we do, but our final goal, the only goal we have is grand prize. And I mean, he really up to that. He made sure that he motivated us. He made sure that he guided along, from the very beginning until the end. So, and I think in terms of, actually we lack sort of a mentorships, the knowledge we gained, all we had was school libraries, Google Internets, of course, but there were several workshops organized by SSCA. We met NASA astronauts, I think Jeff, and also there was talk sessions with experts. We met Professor, I think Williams, was it? Then actually he actually gave us the equations that needed. Actually, he guided, we had this idea, we suggested how this, and he guided along. So actually, it sort of formed the mentorship that we actually desperately needed. So it was a challenge at the very beginning, but as as time goes along, we're getting a lot of supports from the experts, and actually that really helped us a lot. Yeah.
Great. So part of the Space Challenge mission is to make sure we provide students with the right tools and expertise to, help them in their train of thoughts. Because we don't have a space program yet in Singapore, so our students do struggle a little bit. But we want to tell them, don't worry. We will provide the resources and expertise here for you to do well in the competition. Okay. So did Okay. I want to ask Surya this one, just because you have a mic with you. You started your own company in space tech, and was this planned before or after the competition? So which is harder, the space challenge or your startup?
I started the startup slightly about 6 months to 8 months after the competition itself. I didn't have this in mind. When I took part in the Singapore Space Challenge, that was like an opportunity for me to, I was already passionate about space before that. I was just looking for an avenue to really work on something and try to put myself out there. But I think the idea of really starting a startup actually came when I met someone. Me and my team, we were featured in a newspaper. There was one guy who had the same interest as us, who actually saw my name there, and he stalked me on Facebook, and he messaged me there. He's not saying, you know what? I realized that you have all this. I have the exact same passion as you. I'm interested in rocketry and spaceflight. Why don't we start this startup together? And I was like, yeah, actually, I never thought about this before. I went for the Singapore Space Challenge. We won the grand prize and all that, and it was all. It was all good, but it never sparked to me that I could actually take this further. And when he gave me the idea, I was like, let's do it. Let's form this. And it's only when we started doing work on it, we actually realized the realities of actually running a startup. I thought Singapore Space Challenge was difficult. That particular 6 months that we were working on the SSE, it was really difficult. We had to burn a lot of our time and work late at night. It was painful. But when we started doing the startup, it was even worse because we didn't have any support, and two, we are completely left on our own resources, and we had to develop the solution over time and developing our prototypes, and I think anyone who has gone into the entrepreneur phase, like the expert over there, who's developing plasma thrusters, he can testify how difficult it is to actually run a startup, because people are going to ridicule you. No one is going to actually fully get in. You need to really remain remain on the ball and remain motivated as we go about doing it. We are still young. We are still developing our prototypes and all that. We wouldn't call ourselves established or any kind of like good company yet. Yeah, so I would be humble about that. Yeah, but yeah, it has been a quite interesting experience running this startup so far. Yeah.
Now, just to change gear a little bit for Hannah and Priya, were you self-conscious that you were one of the few women who took part in the competition, or okay, maybe not the competition, but in this space tech industry? So one thing I know, there are a few women in the space tech industry, is if I go to a space tech conference, the bathroom for the ladies is very accessible, unlike most of the times. Were you all self-conscious about it? Were there more motivation because you were women, or it was really equal level playing field and you could go all out?
It was more of equal level playing field because what I felt initially, because I didn't really know that there was like a lack of women in this kind of space challenge, is more of like, why not? I'm a human being as well, and why not I participate? Because I have a passion for this kind of thing, so why not try it and go for it? So that's when I entered it, then I realized, oh, there's not really many females here. But I don't blame them as well. Maybe they have other passion for other things as well. So, but my passion lies within space, so that's why I chose it.
Particularly for me, I think the moment you step into STEM, whether it's space or not, you just get used to there being more guys around. So when I started engineering in NUS, there were like few girls in class, I think like 7, and then the rest 30 or 40 were boys. So yeah, I don't know why women don't take up STEM as much, but if you have a passion in engineering, then it's a really good field to be in. And yeah, so once you get used to it, even space, if there are less women, it's okay. We will carry it, both of us.
So I left the education sector for a while already. How is the education system now in Singapore? Is it encouraging and fueling your interest in STEM or space in particular?
Okay, so I can talk about that. So I came from like the JC route, which is different from some of you guys went the poly route. So in Singapore, we generally split like JC and poly. So poly is much more hands-on, you get a lot more chance to do projects. JC is very academic, but generally speaking, if you have the passion for it, your school will support you. So even if your school doesn't have a STEM outreach program, you definitely can go and just email some people, call up some people. I'm sure that they'll be more than happy, especially SST, will be more than happy to support this kind of STEM outreach. So like personally, I run astronomy.sg. So we encourage space and astronomy like initiatives. So if people want to organize events to share their passion for astronomy, which they are actually doing on 26 December this year for the solar eclipse in Singapore, then we'll definitely work towards supporting them for that if their school is unable to.
So any government people here? Okay, no. So any things we could do better to promote more talented people, or if it's good enough, it's also okay.
Yeah, definitely. I think Space Challenge is a good challenge, and it's just the start because, like Surya mentioned, the moment you get into the industry, you start your own startup, there is always a challenge in figuring out how to keep it going. So, and it's really amazing that there are so many space companies coming up in Singapore. So I think when it comes to help from the government, it should be in a way that can help us do what we are doing in terms of funding or, I don't know, there are many innovative ways of raising funds today. So yeah, to come up with such policies that can really keep this space exploration going in Singapore.
Are there many topics on space and exploration in the current syllabus or textbooks?
Actually, technically, there's, for my case, throughout my life, I didn't really heard much about space. The only thing that I learned about space is either through the internet or through books or in the libraries, but other than that, no. But thankfully, because I joined the route of aerospace electronics route in Temasek Polytechnic, my course manager actually recommended me to join this challenge. So it's good to know that at least there is, for example, a diploma like aerospace electronics and aerospace engineering to actually give you information and say like, hey, there is this challenge going on, like, why not try it, that kind of thing. I think right now, currently, there's an, it's not really related to space, but it's more on aerospace. I think SIA is actually making a website challenge as well. It's something to do with space and passengers and cargo, but at the same time, it also integrates different portion, not only space, not only airplanes, but it's also like IT stuff as well. So it's really broad, and at the same time, it makes you explore to different sectors, I guess, in a way. So I think that's great.
Could we do more about the mentorship program? Because you know, in the US, they have a NASA program. They have many people who've gone through that route and they come with experience, and they then come out to go to the high school to mentor the students. But we don't have such in Singapore. In fact, we are looking to you guys to be the mentors for future programs. But is that an important effort to look into in getting sure we get role models, people who could physically spend time with you on your space projects and space ambition?
I think to me, the mentor role is, there's two types of mentors you're looking for. You're looking for one type of mentor that inspires you to start the journey. Because for us, when we start something, the initial step definitely looks very hard. So that's one kind of mentor. The other kind of mentor is the kind that really, like, not just inspires you, but someone that can always go to when you're stuck on some difficult problem. So I would say Singapore, we probably need more of the first one, because in schools we definitely have met a lot of inspiring teachers that are more of the second kind of mentor that really guide you along the way and like foster interest in STEM, which is why we're all here. So I would say we need more of those inspirational figures that really inspire us to start thinking about this possibility of space tech or whatever field that you want to get into, that enables you to, hey, I can do this. From there on, you have this great resource called the internet, and there's a really large community out there that will help you no matter which country you come from, which is definitely how most of us started.
I think Matt Damon did a very good job as being the first kind of mentor in inspiring a lot of people to look at, life on Mars and take the technology to survive. How about you guys? What about the mentorship program? Is there more we could do in Singapore to provide that?
Definitely. When it comes to looking at space exploration, I mean, let's be honest, when it comes to Singapore, because at least the interest in space is still it's still a bit fundamental and a bit. I mean, if you go out there and you talk about, if you go into any say any institution and you talk about space, people are so wowed by it. Like it's like some astrophysics kind of like an abstract topic that they automatically assume that nope, this is too complicated. We won't be involving ourselves. Let's just involve ourselves in just doing things that people have already been doing for the past 50 or 60 years, and that is technically the mindset that is in Singapore. Let's face it. Yeah, and I think more can be done by injecting this into our education system from a very early age. I'm talking about like going into the kindergarten and going to primary school and sending, like establishing a kind of like a space agency, like kind of a space organization in Singapore itself, where the education system is targeted, the engineering sector is targeted, where this message is being put out to start developing this interest in our younglings from a very early age. So actually, I think it's quite important. Yeah.
Actually, something very cute happened in SSTA half a year ago. We received a letter from a K2 kid writing, in a very cute K2 handwriting, saying, "Thank you for doing this. It is so inspiring." And I tell you, that totally wowed everyone in the office that day. We were just so proud of all the work that we were doing. And so we also did think, it's important to start targeting the very young children to know that, hey, this is the journey that we're all collectively going to embark on, and we can do it, and we will do it. So that's really awesome. Now, okay, so wait, did you guys think that space tech was out of reach, and therefore you want to do it? JF Kennedy, we're going there because it's difficult, not because it's easy. Or you wanted to win the $10,000? Or you wanted to prove yourself or make a difference? What was that, motivation in your journey?
So actually, I'm from aerospace engineering from TP. So actually, I joined this course thinking that actually this course involves some sort of space tech, but I hope no one is from TP lecture. So unfortunately, it doesn't really involve any space technology. So I was a bit Mm, yeah, well, I was looking for opportunity, since we're aerospace, we're not aeronautical aerospace, I wanted to learn more about space, and actually I saw this email from schools, and I was very interested. I asked my friends around, but unfortunately, my friends was not really interested at all, but this guy, my classroom, approached me actually to say, actually the next classroom, there's a guy called Surya. Everyone knows him, he's very
I've heard
special.
of him even before I met him.
So he asked me, are you interested, these competitions? And I was like, yeah, sure, I wanted, yes, when I was young, I was inspired, but as the time passes, unfortunately, I sort of lost it, I spent less time stargazing, I was just, looking at my textbook, looking down rather than looking up in the sky. So I wanted something, try new, get more exposures. And I think it's really good to, get out of our comfort zone and everything. So he approached me, and I was like, yeah, sure, I really want to, let's do this. And since for him, he wasn't really, as I said, he wasn't looking for experience. He wanted, to win at the end of the day. And then I was like, yeah, I agree with him.
Being in a supportive, like-minded environment.
Yeah, so I think, that's why I joined this SSC competitions.
Yeah, to add on to that, when the competition first came out, the minute I saw the email, I went on the day itself. I went to recruitment. I started to I asked around who is capable of performing this. Yeah, so I found her and all that. I knew the competition offered a $10,000 award. I honestly didn't care. The money wasn't that much of a concern for me. But what was more important to me was this is something that when it comes to Singapore in general, we're not doing enough, and mankind itself, we're not doing enough. And I saw this as an opportunity. Yeah, sure, there's definitely the desire to really make myself known and establish myself. Yes, of course. I saw this as an opportunity to elevate myself from just a nobody as a student into someone that people will know and respect. So I can use that position to really achieve my ultimate goal, and that is really to advance the space frontier, be it the world or in Singapore. So yes, I did. So I told my team, and I found my team. I made it clear to them that if you want to remain in my team, we're not going to have fun. We're going to make sure we win the grand prize. Not because we're going to win the money, but we're going to make sure that we're going to get nothing less than the first prize. So if you're not on the same page as me, then get out of my team. Yeah. So
really a pioneering effort.
So the people who did remain, they were committed to it. And we did move forward, and we achieved the goal that I set out initially. So we did get $10,000, yes, but our lives totally changed after that, not because of the money, but because when we won, suddenly there were new contacts in our life, and new people started realizing, and that is the reason why I even decided to start a company in the first place. It was a stepping ground. It was like a turning point in my life where my life was completely different after the competition. That was what my ultimate goal was when I took part in the competition, to really go out and do what I had this vision in my mind, and I saw this competition as an opportunity to make this vision a reality.
The pioneering spirit in you.
Correct. Yeah. So it wasn't. I did not take part in the competition to have fun. Yeah, because it was something that's going to consume all of my time and all that. I don't do things for fun. I do things to achieve a final goal set in mind that I wanted to do. And yeah, so I'm thankful that there were people who stuck with me. I did torture them, and there were many sleepless nights and all that. But yeah, we all worked together and we won. I would not have done it without the efforts of my team members. Yeah, she was instrumental. Just to describe her role in the competition, she designed the power subsystem of our transponder. So she basically did all the calculations, calculated the exact surface area of the solar panels that were required, the battery size and all that, and she came up with the entire the circuit components and everything, and that was something I couldn't have done, honestly. So yeah, thank you very much.
I think you realize that in space, it's a lot about teamwork. It's never a one-man show, and it's always going to be a collective effort by everyone. Now, rewind a few back pre-year. I don't know whether we had the $10,000 prize in your year when you won, 2000. Great. And here she is, a young CEO of Explore Maps. How do you feel about your journey as a young CEO in the technology today? You've come a long way. What could, besides the funding part you raised earlier, what more could be done to create the ecosystem of activities?
So I'll just backtrack. Back in 2011, I had just joined NUS, and I was hungry to learn everything I could there and anything to do with space. And thankfully, at that point in time, two things started up really new, I guess. One was particularly Space Challenge. I think that was one of the earlier years, and that came up. And then there was this thing called Design-Centric Program in NUS that teaches you how to build satellites. So that came up. And so I would say that in the university that I was from, there was good support in terms of education. And with Singapore Space Challenge coming in, it really pushed a lot. From there, I realized that it's a personal thing that, if you want to impact the world and if there isn't as much support, then you go and do something, right? So that has always been my journey. From there, now with Astropreneurs Hub, and now going forward with Explore Maps. The thing about space is that it's an industry that's still developing, and we, all of us, need to create it. So we have to think of ways of how we can, explore more of space. Either that is by doing something else to get funding, which is exactly what we're trying to do with Astropreneurs Hub, or I don't know, some other ways, so that we continue doing a good job in exploration of space. Yeah.
Do you think we should have a space agency in Singapore, Priya?
Why not? I think so many more kids, young kids, will be inspired to do that. When I was in Singapore and I wanted to do something in space, I was like, okay, if I look at NASA's website, it's all US citizens, damn. Then I look at India's website, okay, I need to be in India, but I'm not, so damn. I wish there was something in Singapore. And I think if there is something like that, kids would just apply for internships for various projects and whatnot, and the ecosystem support, everything will grow phenomenally.
What do you guys think? Should we have a space agency in Singapore? It's on recording, by the way. Yes?
Yes.
Now, the next tricky question is very tricky for Singaporeans. I've done this a few times, and many people were disappointed. Do you want to go to Mars? Because we're very pragmatic.
Definitely.
Set the stage, Gwen Shotwell, in one of his interviews, did say, I wouldn't want to go to Mars. It's cold, there's no oxygen, it's not luxurious at all, it's not comfortable. She doesn't want to go to Mars, but obviously Elon Musk is going to. Do you guys want to go to Mars?
I think, why should Elon Musk go? Why can't someone from Singapore go?
Well,
that's all. Figure out a way to go to Mars.
It will be Surya. First guy to sign up, right?
Well, I'll be very honest. If you ask this question, it goes more into my personal life. All that. Do I want to go to Mars? The answer would be no. I wouldn't want to go there.
It's a very uniquely Singaporean answer. So anyway.
Yeah, the answer would be no, and there are two reasons to it. One is I feel like I strongly feel that with my interests and abilities, I would serve best staying here on Earth, helping to develop the technologies required to send our first pioneers to Mars instead. I definitely want to go to space. Of course, who doesn't want to, right? But I feel like in the long term, what my purpose would be, I think I would do our fair better remaining here on Earth. And a second, more personal reason why I don't want to go to Mars is, I have a strong desire within me. I really want to get married and have children also. Yeah, so I see myself. I see myself as a family man in the future. So I personally can't stay in another environment like Mars alone and doing all that.
It's a little bit hard for that.
Yeah, so the answer would be no to that.
Anyone has any more answers? Yeah. So I was asked before in an interview if I wanted to go to space, and obviously I said, no, I don't want to go to space, but I want to send my kids to space because noise doesn't travel through vacuum. Okay. So with that, I'm going to end this panel session here. Thank you for staying behind and listening to our young Singaporeans and their journey in space. And there's more of such talks tomorrow, so we welcome you back here at the Art Science Museum. Oh, you want a question? Yeah, is that good? That's a
It's really inspiring that you guys have these cool ideas about space. Yeah, I was just saying that to me, these guys are younger than me, and it's really inspiring to hear your views and your thoughts. I just wanted to ask, in line with the theme of today, Singapore in space, where do you all see Singapore, say, 50 years from now in the field of space?
Repeat it?
Where do you see Singapore 50 years from now in the field of space?
Oh, you guys will be so young then. Oops.
So do you want a pragmatic answer or do you want a hopeful answer? Well, hopefully speaking, Singapore will be like, historically we've always been a trade hub of Southeast Asia, right? So hopefully we'll be a spaceport of Southeast Asia. But the pragmatic answer is probably we're gonna just end up building other people's stuff.
Actually, we were one of the most efficient maritime port. And then we were an entrepreneur trade to begin with, right, in the early years if you study the history. And then there was marine trade, and then there was airport. I think when space travel becomes commercialized, suborbital flights, I think it's perfectly possible that we want to maintain ourselves as a status of an efficient logistics hub and go into spaceport. So I think that's a very hopeful and practical and definitely possible answer in 50 years' time.
Okay, so when you asked about 50 years in space, 50 years is a super long time, so I obviously cannot be practical about it. So let's just talk about a dream, and the dream is that we have probably gone to some heavenly body, and the thing I strongly believe in is that when you cannot plan out anything so distant, you just have a crazy dream, and then you figure out every day how you get to that. So I'm sure if with us and more people growing, having this interest in space, Singapore can do so much more cool stuff that probably any other country hasn't yet. It's possible. We just have to believe in it. Thank you.
I do have one last question for everyone on the panel, and maybe Lynette as well. Looking at the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, what does the first moon landing actually mean to you personally?
I'll answer that. The first moon landing and my knowledge of learning about it is the very reason why I'm even here and I'm talking. When I watched this documentary called The Space Race, Net Geo Space Race between America and the Soviet Union, I think the man that inspired me was Dr. Werner von Braun, former German scientist and lead project manager of NASA during the Apollo era. And when I watched that documentary, and to learn that mankind in the 1960s decided to band together and travel to, I think I explained it, travel to a world that completely exists beyond, what was once thought impossible to reach. So like whenever I look at the moon and I still find it hard to believe today that someone actually went there and landed there. And that really activates the childlike awness within me, and it really motivates me. Like someone went there, and we have an obligation right now to carry forward their legacy of landing of going back to the moon. I think the Apollo space program and me learning is a very reason even got me interested in this entire. So it really means a lot to me. In words I cannot put actually. Yeah. So.
Well, I think the 50th anniversary, if we looking back today, I guess you can all sum it in one word, which is hope. Like looking back, if we can do that 50 years ago, imagine what can we do 50 years from now. So that really brings a lot of hope to what we can do, like as a whole group and not just as an individual.
And just adding on to Ming Chia's comment, this started off as a dream by John F. Kennedy or someone, a group of people in NASA, and it happened. So the only conclusion is dreams come true.
A dream comes true unless we make sure that we need to work hard. This doesn't come in one day. But
exactly, Hunji, on that point. When I first heard about the moon landing, it was so fascinating. And it felt easy because it was already done. And then when I got into space tech, I realized how difficult it really, really humanly is impossible to get into moon, and all the hard work and collective effort behind it. So all the effort starts to come through, and something that seems so easy is so difficult, but we can do it. And I think that was a very important message for me. While we entertain the fantasy, I think let's not forget all the hard work behind it, and know at the end of the day we can get there.
Okay, so I'm the last speaker for today. Anyway, today I think, the thing is Moongazers, so that's why I think moon. I know we spoke a lot about Mars, going to all these places, but okay, let's talk about maybe the closest satellite that we have, and that's the moon. So today I just wanted to frame some context here. I think I'm here to talk about, if you have seen that moon lander outside, so there's a spacecraft there. And then, of course, some applications, why people are going to the moon, why some people don't want to go to the moon, But just to maybe frame the context here, I mean, I won't go through all the words on the slide. I think, some of you may be maybe more familiar with the moon than Mars. But going to the moon is something that, we had 50 years of the moon landing. We're coming up to the anniversary. And we've been thinking about going back to the moon, And a lot of people have been asking questions about why have we not gone back, Is it because there's no money, no resources, got a lot of problems, And but let me just be the first to tell you that inherently it's very hard to leave the atmosphere in one piece, right? So to go to the moon is even more challenging. And I think there's a lot of people that have been trying to do that. And I'm going to frame some of this in this couple of slides over this conversation today. Okay, so we have people going to the moon, you have people walked on the moon, but there are also many spacecraft that go to the moon. And the particular spacecraft outside, built by Moon Express, their MX series moon lander, and to some degree it also can be a lunar orbiter as well. It's designed to actually go to the moon, collect samples, bring payloads there, conduct scientific experiments on the moon, and eject parts that can also come back to Earth. Yeah, this is the brainchild of the Moon Express team that actually participated in the Google X Prize moon mission that unfortunately ended in March 2018 with no winners. And so you can imagine, right, there were 5, 6, 7 teams, I think, end of the day, that and all these were the top scientists and best, super. They are all our space challenge guys on stage just now vying to go to the moon, right? But in the end, even though there was a nice cash prize of $30 million US, right, and they give you a lot of runway, nobody could make the timeline, right? And even till today, the reality is it's still tough to do, and it's also very hard to do from a private enterprise perspective. So these guys are trying to get to the moon commercially, cost-effectively, and in the fastest way possible. So the good news is, I think there are still people that are trying, and the ultimate goal here is really to explore the nearest celestial body that's closest to us in a much larger way. There are also folks that also want to do experiments on the moon. The moon can be used for many things. Before we go into all the, I won't call it science fiction, because the truth is many countries today are also thinking of establishing lunar bases, lunar operations, and for very good reason. The moon is actually the gateway, and I think this is something that we all agree within the space industry. It's really the gateway to further exploration. Not quite sure whether we'll find anything on the moon. Some people say you find water, you find this and that, but all to be seen. Maybe you find oil, everybody will be there. But okay, but the reality is, I think many people are trying to establish a moon operation, because you do need to have a gateway, to do telescope operations, to see further into the universe, to refuel rockets so that you can go to Mars. So when they say go to Mars, right? Many of these companies don't tell you how they'll get there. So there's this nice picture of the rocket going all the way to Mars. But you do need to refuel somewhere. You need to have maintenance. So in orbit docking and all this takes place, and that's where the closest body you have to do all this is the moon, right? Because you could build a space station and many space stations, but that's even more expensive. right? So the SSTA partners with many organizations that conducts moon missions, fortunately, and one of them that we are partnered to is the International Lunar Observatory Association. A very interesting organization. They are like my colleague here just now from astronomy.sg. I mean, basically they are astronomy club on steroids. They actually run the astronomy centers on Hawaii, where they have all the ground stations and also home to some of the largest telescopes that can see the cosmos. Right, they are headquartered there. And their mission is actually to conduct astronomy missions from the moon, right? And why the moon? I mean, people ask because, well, if you are deployed on the far side, on the south side of the moon, you have unrestricted access to space. And I mean, today when we use our telescopes, or even if we use the best observatories on the planet, there's a lot of clutter and light that diffuse the operations. So to punch through all that, it will get you a nice image, but if you could see it from the moon, it will be perfect, right? So these guys are also trying to get to the moon, and they are working with our partners, Moon Express. They are one of the payloads. You can see the little telescope there. So there's a little payload there that's a bit, maybe half the size of the chair you're sitting on, and it will self-deploy, and there will be a telescope that will be deployed from the payload box. And it will also have an antenna that can live feed back the images to Earth. And it can eventually also be a radio frequency transmitter, meaning that you can have radio also from the moon. So subsequently, if you have moon bases and operations, you do need to have some kind of a radio antenna system deployed there to have communications. And guess what? These guys will be facilitating that. And they are working together with many countries, India, China, other chaps as well. So it is a truly international effort. And you may think it's just stargazing from the moon, right? Yeah, but when you want to do that, imagine the Hubble telescope times 1,000, trying to do all that. And being based on the moon is something that's quite unique. So, people have been asking, again, coming to the question, why there's been no moon missions in the past. Actually, now we're getting a lot of that because the US administration and NASA is pushing for moon missions at an accelerated pace. And all the guys who are for the moon, I mean, there's a few camps. Some guys are for Mars, some guys going to go Saturn, and then there's this whole bunch that wants to go to the moon. So all the guys that want to go to the moon are very excited because President Trump has accelerated the time scale, I think, by a couple of years, almost half a decade, to get astronauts back, I think, by 2024, and to have more missions going back to the moon in stages, in phases, precursors as well over the next few years, which is very exciting because I mean there's a lot of opportunities now for private industry to get back into the game, right? So there has already been robotic missions that's been going to the moon, and honestly, whether or not there's an astronaut going or not is really not the point here. Every mission that goes is important because every mission that goes teaches us something along the way, right? Whether it is a success or a successful failure in some cases, right? So recently we had the Space IL mission, the Israeli startup that was part of the Google X Prize as well. He was in Singapore 2-3 weeks ago, and basically what happened is they sent the first private spacecraft to the moon, right? It was just a bunch of guys, that decided to do this for the Google X Prize. They raised $100 million and they went. So they went all the way to the moon, and they got to the moon, but they got there in many pieces because they hit the moon and it crashed. So, but to get there, just a few guys, working out of a workshop, partnering. Maybe yes, they have good partners, but it's still a startup. It's really quite a feat, right? And I think now they're trying to do another mission to go further. So the point here is that now they learn, and they have broken a few records in terms of how do you build small spacecraft cost effectively, and they can do it at scale. So perhaps it could be a very commercially viable business as well for them. So, it's also not technology or science, I think, has prevented us from going back. I mean, we all know that the technology, I mean, through all these enterprises exist. Sometimes it's also political will. So I think we talk about, do we want to go to the moon? So even on the panel here, it's also 50-50. So can you imagine if you go and do a election, go to a government panel? I think it would be a tough sell. But it's not something that is impossible. I think today the reality is that moon missions are becoming more possible, because in the past, when we used to do it in the Apollo era, it was very expensive. And these were all R&D missions, run out of very large government budgets. And you do need collectively very large resources in those days to get there. You still need a lot of resources to do it today, right? But because of the democratization of space, barriers of entry have come down. I think many countries, it is very international today. It's not just the US or the Soviet Union, in the past, or, everybody is all doing it together. In fact, actually, it's very interlocuted. If you do a space mission by yourself, you probably fail, because it is it's also something that requires the international community to come together, right? So it's really not very far away. I think it's a 4-day mission, and yes, you can have observation, communications, but I think ultimately as well, we want to use that as a stepping stone, right? So, people ask also, what are the various advantages of having observation site on the moon, or being close to the moon, or being on the moon, And there are some reasons here. It is equatorial plane. You have access to, you have unlimited access, I think, to vantage points. Where depending on where you land as well, it allows you to perform a variety of lunar, terrestrial applications and operations. If you want to start to dig, and look for whether it is water or minerals and ore, again, I think many of these have been imaged by many space agencies already. So there's no lack of landing sites as well. I think people know where they want to go. It's just a matter whether you have a good pilot or not. You might miss it by 10,000 kilometers. But I think you still need to get there, and you can perform these functions. And if you have a sustained presence on the moon, I think that's where you can exploit all this data. So again, we might not have gone back to the moon for the past umpteen decades, but thanks to all the science and technology, we've been looking at it for so long, and all these guys have been churning out, tons of data on the moon. So I can only expect that once we get back, the guys will know what to do on the moon straight away. It won't be one small step and then he just takes now 10 more steps. He would, be able to do a lot more things. Again, do more with less. Okay. Okay, so this question also has come up, and I thought I'd address it because are we going to colonize the moon? So this is maybe a question for the UN. I don't know how I can answer this question, but many countries are trying to get there. Many countries want to put their flags there first, right? But the moon is a pretty big place. I am not so sure whether it is moon or Mars that any one country can plant their flag there and say, look, I'm there, I'm going to colonize it. If it's a multinational effort to colonize, I think maybe a bit more possible. And there are topics about moon, Mars governance. Just like how I think today there's topics about space governance. Who owns certain parts of the atmosphere, who owns certain parts of the stratosphere, where you put your satellite. When you put up a satellite into space, you actually do need to register it. It's like your car ECOE. You need to buy a ticket first, then you can put it up there. So it's not like you can just place a satellite wherever you want to. You must actually register it with a registry. The United Nations Office for Space Affairs needs to make sure they track that, because your satellite could one day become space debris. When you leave it there, it stops working. So all these things needs to be tracked, right? And it's the same thing when you do any space operations. All these things need to be registered. So this, I think, requires a lot more thinking. And I guess eventually people will have to colonize, but it will be a step approach. And then, of course, then it's how do you colonize? You do need the right expertise to do so as well. You're not just going to construct a few prefab containers and sit down there, right? You do need to have labs. You need to have construction materials. You need to have people that can grow food. It has to be sustainable living. You need energy. You can't just bring your power bank there. Run out of juice real quick. Right? So you need to have all these things to put it together. So it's a big systems engineering effort, right? Which again requires a lot of chaps that are in STEM, you know, and all disciplines, I think, in science, technology, and even the applied sciences as well, you know. I mean, when you go to the moon and you stay there for a long time, you know, it could be longer than you going to Mars, right? So you do need to have teams that can work together, right? Behavioral sciences need to be understood, you know. Can you work with your friend? Yeah, you know, now in class you can work with him, right? But imagine going to the moon and staying with him for 4 years. You know, you better make sure you like him. So, yeah, so, you know, do you go out with your family, you know, husband, wife, maybe girlfriend, boyfriend, maybe not, you know, what if you break up, you know. So there's all these considerations. And trust me, these are things that they actually do when they profile you to go for Mars missions, you know. That's why they have all these simulated tests, because you know, when you want to be part of a colony, you got to work together. We don't want a colony that goes up there and after 6 months, the first radio back is, oh, we're fighting, you know. Then we're not helping anybody. So these are all considerations, I think, when we talk about colonizing. So that's, I think, a very big step. But again, I think it's being studied today. So the good news is, I think we're probably getting there. So ultimately, once we're there, I mean, we talk about what's the resources, right? Because people need to have an ROI. There's a return on investment of, I think, whatever major mission is there. I mean, you can go there and explore it, and it looks pretty. But ultimately, if you want a sustainable presence on the moon, and again, this can be stretched to Mars as well, which is just a bit more difficult. You need to identify what resources are there that can be extracted. What can we take, what we cannot, you know, and what can be applied again and be broken down into useful materials that can extend our life further, you know, for further missions. So I mean, we talk about water, okay, that's essential, you know. Then what can you use the water for? You know, can it be broken down to its key components so that you can do other things with it, which is the main point here, and that's why we need a whole bunch of chemists and chemical engineers to go up with us, because this is going to be a fundamental, right? You just cannot take a moon rock, look at it, and hope you can do it. You know, and that's the thing, right? I mean, this is where we go second, third, fourth order details into why, if you're going to be part of a moon mission and you want to go into space, you better be the best at what you're doing, because when you're up there, right, and now you go to your garden and you pick up a rock and you don't know what it is, that's fine, you know. Yeah, but when you go up there, you better know what a rock can do for you, right? And if you don't know the answer to that, you have no business going up to the moon, right? So that's also why it's so hard to get into the astronaut corps, right? I mean, the failure rate is very high. You got 20,000 guys applying, you got 4 guys who make it, you know, because you really got to be the best of the best, right? So and then you can figure out what you want to do up there. So yes, I think the answer is yes, we are doing that. Many countries are doing that as well. You can see general knowledge-wise, I think the US is leading this. You know, we have the European Space Agency that's pushing up a lot of missions. You know, France, Germany, Italy. China is doing a lot as well. In fact, China has already been doing quite a lot at the moon. They've launched a lot of satellites, imaged a lot of the far side of the moon as well. They've dropped landers, you know. We have robotic missions on the moon. It's not just the Western countries that are doing it. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians have also accomplished it, and some of them even doing it for a lot less resources than some of their Western counterparts. So if you talk about whether or not Southeast Asia or Asian countries have a shot at also going to space, I think some of our larger neighbors have already demonstrated that we can and are already doing it. Yeah, and it's again, you know, a whole private-public partnership with industry. You know, today a lot of space missions are privatized, right? So that gives that whole spectrum of opportunity to all our friends here as well, right? You don't just have to be a government employee tomorrow to go to the moon. You can do it yourself, right? But of course, I encourage you to work with partners, right, who have the resources to propel you there. Okay, so. I touched a bit about what you're supposed to do, but I mean, in terms of preparing for these missions as well, there's a lot of prep work. And yes, you know, I think tourism and space tourism has captured the imagination of a lot of the press. In my view, I think the space tourism part will eventually become a reality anyway, if you get the rocketry and the spacecraft science right. Right, because if the technology is there for you to go up and have reusable spacecraft and eventually bring the price of taking a spacecraft, you know, from point to point between Singapore and let's say New York, you know, if you do a transorbital flight, it gets you there in 90 minutes and the price is a first class ticket, I think people will buy it. Right, so today again, when prices come down, you have Uber taxis, you know, helicopter rides. And actually, a friend of mine recently took the Uber taxi, you know, in New York. Yeah, so he came down and he had a meeting in town, and it's $250, something like that. And it's very affordable. It just took the, I mean, versus that, taking a taxi, it costs you $100 and you spend 3 hours in traffic. You know, the helicopter is just a 20-minute ride, you know. So these things are becoming a reality. It's just about getting it to the right price point. right? So this part is a little bit about the SSTA and the Singapore Space and Technology Association. So I mean we have been around for a while. I mean we've been around for about more than 12 years now. And actually Singapore space journey, this is not entirely accurate. Actually my colleagues who have been speaking earlier in the day, of course, have had shared with you about the university projects and satellites that have been going on. So yes, from a spacecraft deployment perspective, we have the timelines are correct. But just to share with you, Singapore has been looking at space, R&D, technology tinkering around, actually since the early 1990s. Yeah, we had our first payloads built then. We partnered the UK, we partnered Germany, we partnered India, and it's been born out of our universities, which is where Prof. Wee Seng just now was speaking earlier in the day as well. The NTU program actually was one of the early pioneers of satellite research, right? So we may not be in the manned missions or exploration phase today, but we certainly have done quite a bit in terms of sending up hardware into space, many of them for R&D. And as recent as 2015, the first satellite on top there called Telios 1, so that is Singapore's first commercial satellite that was built by Singapore Technologies. So actually maybe in Singapore it's a faster race because our commercial industry, maybe because of a lack of space agency here, is taking the lead. And it's very opportune time because where in the world you have the space access and industry guys, taking the charge, our industry guys are taking the lead as well. So it is a completely, it's a private enterprise, a private-led initiative. People in the company believe that there is a market for satellite applications, and hence why they have taken that lead. Okay, then the other 5 satellites are R&D, from the universities. But I mean, again, you piggyback, all go up together, and then you can learn and leverage off each other's knowledge. Yeah. So over the years, you can see the satellites have been getting better. They're more improved. A lot of it is remote sensing, meaning that we take pictures of Earth. We study topography for mapping usage. Some of it is for communications, for navigation. It is how you get your GPS is working. You can use a Grab. They can charge you accurately. You don't overcharge. Point-to-point distance tracking is all done by satellite. And your phone is still working. All this is satellite technology, right? So all these are enablers, and this is something that Singapore is very heavy into. The technology applications, exploitations of of satellite data, right, which is also the largest revenue generator of the space industry. So our ecosystem in Singapore is also fairly established. If you look at the companies that have been here for a while, they're quite spread out, quite diverse as well. We have manufacturers that are here. We have launch providers, ground service chaps. We have a whole bunch of startups, as you can see, and we have a lot of younger companies now coming up, trying to look at specific subsystems and payloads to penetrate the market. Yeah, so it's very international. I mean, we have Singapore companies, we have locally based foreign companies, we have foreign companies that come and work with our companies on projects, joint projects. And the good news about space is it's very international, right? So we do a lot of work cross-border. The SSTA looks at a few specific areas in satellite technology. One of them is the humanitarian and disaster relief challenge that we have, innovation challenge. Again, one of my previous speakers here was one of the students that participated in our HADR challenge. Basically, it's very simple. We want to exploit satellite technology to help our neighbors in terms of disaster relief, because satellite technology can be used for many emergency response applications. For example, when the civil defense goes and supports a rescue operation in an earthquake or tsunami nearby. Typically after a disaster, the old maps are useless because it's completely different. If it's a tsunami, it's flat land. If it's an earthquake, the whole area is destroyed, right? So when rescuers go in, they need the fastest, most updated maps or images to help them find survivors, and also to make sure that they go in safely, right? Because you don't want to walk into a disaster zone and then you end up being in need of help, right? So this is something that satellites, eye in the skies, can help and it can support our relief efforts. The SST also works with startups, so we run our own accelerators. We work with young space companies. Again, many of them have been speaking already, and this is something that we support them with market access, being able to partner them with the right entities as well, and also to educate even people that are trying to fund their activities, because a lot of them are trying to capitalize. And being able to educate the general population about what they're doing helps their VCs and their backers understand the challenges of a space startup. Right? And also we deploy satellites from the International Space Station as well. So for all you, I think you may know, we have a very big International Space Station orbiting Earth right now at 400 over kilometers. And this is a multinational effort, to my point earlier that these large projects are all multinational. So the SSTA works exclusively with the Japanese Space Agency, where we can deploy satellites on demand from the space station. Mostly for R&D, we leverage on they have a JSOT deployer system. It's a little shooter, like a Nerf gun, it shoots out satellites, right? And basically they allow this for universities and for commercial payloads to be experimented quick and cost effectively as well, versus you having to buy a whole rocket and then launching it. This is something for smaller satellites. And just a couple of weeks ago, in June, we deployed the National University of Singapore's quantum key distribution quantum payload from their satellite as well, from the International Space Station. Okay. We also have student programs, education programs. We work with Japan again to use their module on the space station for education programs for students. They can test and try their prototypes. They can fly experiments in space in zero gravity, which is the whole purpose of this exercise. And this is something that's been open to a lot of Asia-Pacific countries for a while. Yeah, they can design experiments, they can test hypotheses, and they can do it on board. And it's done live and real time, by the way, meaning that you actually conduct your experiment live. There's an astronaut inside, they give you feedback, you can talk to the astronaut, and you give him instructions, he does it. Right? So it is something that's quite unique. And again, we have our Space Challenge here, which many of our speakers have been graduates from, and they have gone through our annual design competition. And this is really to encourage our youth to think out of the box, to come up with new concepts, to push the boundaries of what's next for satellite engineering. Every year we have platforms as well. Our biggest platform is the Global Space and Technology Convention. The SSTA organizes this every year for the past 11 years. Next year, it's always during the February period. And this brings about 800 or so delegates from the global space industry to Singapore to discuss, and to discuss topics, next trends in space technology, also to gain mind share in what we're doing, and also to give our local ecosystem, all these chaps that we're working with, the exposure to the global space industry. Okay, so this is something to look out for. And just so you know, we also are trying to bid for larger space events, very recognized platforms in the world to come to Singapore. Right? So in 2022, we are bidding to be a candidate city for the 2022 International Astronautical Congress. The IAC is the largest space show in the world. It draws in about anything between 7,000 to 8,000 guys, and it's been around for over 70 years. Yeah, and we're hoping that in 2022, if we get it in Singapore, this will be a big boon for the country and uplift, I think, the entire ecosystem. Hopefully, if we get it, I think one of the venues that they're considering is actually right here. So, in 3 years' time, we'll come back here, but there'll be like 10,000 guys. Okay, so this is something that we're bidding for. We're going to be setting up a Team Singapore to make this bid at the show this year in Washington, D.C. in October. But win or lose, I think the point here is that we have also managed to raise the signature of Singapore's efforts in space to the global space community. Okay, and I think this is my last slide before I just show you a quick video, but you can read about all the things that we do, I think, out there in the media. Ultimately, I think we are just trying to pave the way for people to understand what Singapore is doing in space, make it very bite-sized and also simple, It's not beyond anybody. It's not rocket science that you must be a PhD and then you can do this. That's not true actually. We have people from all walks of life. I have interns that come in from all sectors as well, contributing to the industry. And we welcome all of you, young and old, to be part of our journey. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a quick video of the ILO-1 mission of the Moon Express, the project outside, so you have some context of what they're doing on the moon, and then I can take questions.
For thousands of years, humanity has gazed upwards, contemplating our place in the universe. Last century witnessed our first steps beyond Earth. This century will feature deeper exploration of our solar system and the galaxy beyond. Expanding human knowledge of the cosmos is the goal of the International Lunar Observatory Association, fostering education and enterprise en route to our 21st century destiny. ILO-1 is one of the first missions to the Moon's South Pole. The destination is Malapert Mountain, with an altitude of 5 kilometers and expansive views of the surrounding region. Access to this unique frontier of exploration is a challenge, with shadowing and topography demanding state-of-the-art precision landing capabilities. As an observatory, ILO-1 demands precise alignment and stable, high-bandwidth communications. The primary payload is a dual-mode radio antenna for galaxy and astronomy imaging and communications back to Earth. The secondary payload is an optical telescope for visible and infrared observation. Science education and public engagement have been fundamental principles for the ILOA since its inception in 2003. From broadcasts from the lunar surface to galaxy science and education in every class, ILO-1 enables a new level of public access and mission participation. The unique instrument suite also supports several secondary commercial applications, from Earth observation and lunar site characterization to nearby operational mission support, reporting and supporting global space exploration as it unfolds. There is high scientific and commercial interest in the lunar poles. ILO-1 will provide communications and navigation support and is being developed in consultation with international and commercial partners. From lander and payload design to the chosen destination atop Malapert, ILO-1 is being designed for long-term operation. As humanity charts its next steps in space exploration, ILO-1 aims to pioneer a new frontier for astronomy, exploration, and space education via the surface of the moon. Cooperatively, peacefully, and with aloha for the good of all.
Okay, that's it. So thank you very much. Anybody has any questions? Yes.
Recently, they are able to take a picture of the black hole image. So is it possible that for space in future that we are able to explore the possibility of the existence of parallel universe?
That's a very hard question. Okay, I am not qualified to answer that question, to be very honest. But we have images, you're right, that have started to take pretty precise pictures of various black holes actually, and I think it started to, there was recently an article where they put a mosaic together of the black holes, so they were studying whether or not, if you go through the black hole, you go through one, then you just finish, but you go through more than one, right, then what happens? I think that was where that context came out from. So I don't know, but I think that's where it will be a combination of the imager, but ultimately, in my view, you have to send a spacecraft in, right? And I think that's where we have some of our, like for example, our Voyager spacecraft that is still moving out in outer space. I think it's already left our solar system. It takes a long time, but now that we can get a better trajectory, I think, of the alignment of these black holes, we can accurately send spacecraft in that direction. And that is proven by the Voyager mission, and also recently our Saturn Cassini mission, where it was launched, I think, more than about 20 years ago. And recently it also entered Saturn's atmosphere, right, to also study its rings. So just to give you some context, the calculations of that was based off 20 years ago to send a spacecraft, to that kind of distances and to enter the atmosphere at a precise spot. So I think we can probably do it, and if there's somebody else on the other side, then that's good. And hopefully he's got money or something. But yeah, so yes, I think it's possible. But the purpose of this imager is to study the unknowns of the universe, and that's why the ILOA actually focuses a lot on exploration, deep space exploration. And he actually, if you go to their website, you will see the publications of what they had. There are a lot of nice pictures and mosaics, because in Hawaii, where they operate some of or they work together with the operators of some of these, the world's largest ground stations, they remotely can study the data, right? So I encourage you to take a look as well.
We might have one last question.
Oh, over there.
The gentleman in front.
I think she was also, I think we can do both days. Hopefully it's easier than the other one.
It's said in your film that it's designed for long-term use. What do you understand on a long-term? 10 years, 20 years?
Okay, typically these missions, the payloads would probably be tested for up to 4 years, continuous usage. And that's currently based on our extrapolation of the rovers that we have sent to the Moon and Mars. Right? So their design life cycle actually is for much shorter, but from what we have seen, the rovers can last beyond their design life cycle. So they are lasting for 3, 4, up to 5 years. Right? So we're probably looking at that range for the first batch. And also that's because of the size of the payload. That's the limiting factor, and we are constrained by its size. So we only can put so much hardening on it, and power supplies as well. No doubt there are solar panels that will be attached to the lander to generate power as well, but even that also has a design life cycle, which is typically within the range of about 3 to 4 years, optimistically. If it goes beyond that, that means it's pretty good.
And what happens when it doesn't work anymore? Does it come back to Earth, or does it just stay there, and Moon must be full of all these devices?
You're right. So these devices, the ones that have gone up already, are still there. Right? This guy that's going up will also remain there. The good news is we don't have as much space junk on the Moon yet, because there's only been a couple of rovers. The operating word is yet. But I think for these initial missions, the precursor missions, if we land anything on the Moon, or even if we have orbiters that have to be deorbited on the ground, we'll probably have to leave it there, because the missions are designed to be more rapid, to get us to the different staged or different phases, to get us to actual operation, sustained operation. So it will take some time. But hopefully, I think when we get there and have a more sustained presence, we'll be able to do some recovery of these assets. But also to paint it in context, because the moon is relatively virgin territory for us, it's not, I won't constitute it as, okay, all junk is junk, but it is not, it will not pose a hazard to our explorations. Sorry, there's one more question, right? Somebody in front. Spaceport.
In 2006.
Oh, okay. So, that's fine. Okay. So he asked about the spaceport concept. We were studying the field. Singapore, I think, was one of the countries that was identified by a private enterprise to build a spaceport. But I think the idea was a bit ahead of its time. The companies that were behind it were not able to fully generate the revenue, build up enough funding to go to the actual operational phases of building the spacecraft. I think the spaceport in itself is not really an issue. We just need to, I think we are identifying some buildings and near Changi Airport, and then you can just point out the runways. But even then also you got to see whether the runway is available. Yeah, but I think the key thing was generating the capital to actually develop the spacecraft and eventually, of course, the business case. So I think somewhere, I think in 2006, I think, or just before that, the companies or the foreign companies that are responsible to do that were not able to go further. So that's where it stopped. But again, spaceport feasibility has been ongoing, I think, throughout the world. And I think the private OEMs have started to realize that it's also not so simple to identify a spaceport, because actually Singapore was chosen because of our ancillary support operations. To have a spaceport is not just about tourists, as you know, right? You need to support, maintain, service the spacecraft. You need full MRO facilities, maintenance, repair, hangars and all. So Singapore's strength of an aviation and aerospace hub actually gave us the advantage. And that was why, actually, I think today almost every space tourism company has visited Singapore already and have wanted us to have a spaceport, in Singapore or whatever it is. But the flip side is, because we are also a air hub, so our inbound flights are very intense, right? So we have a lot of commercial traffic, air traffic. So to manage that and to put a space tourism vehicle for, let's say, leisure and all this, and also to deconflict with our military flights and helicopters and whatever else that you have, became also a challenging point to address. Yeah, so this is something that has been a dilemma, but I think the civil aviation authorities around the world are trying to address this, because many other hubs were identified, like Japan, of course the big ones were the major cities in the US, in Europe, I think Germany, France were also identified, but every airport flagged out the same issues, congestion. Actually, there are more and more aircraft today. Traffic is just becoming worse, right? So how are you going to fit that guy in? And because it's a commercial business, it's like booking train tickets. I need to make sure that every slot counts. And between commercial traffic and emergencies, a space tourism vehicle landing would probably be the last priority, right? So again, that business case needs to be studied in a bit more detail. But for now, I think we unfortunately don't have we are not looking at a spaceport, but Singapore is very keen to participate on the co-creation and co-development of the spacecraft, right? So to us, again, as I said, the space tourism will come if you can get the technology right.